In ancient Greece, the distinction between magic and religion was not always so clear-cut. Choosing between one or the other depended more on the social context in which the ritual acts were performed than on the nature of the acts themselves. For instance, curses and prayers could usually be used for both magical and religious purposes at the same time. And simultaneously, philosophers developed notions of religion that excluded conceptions of magic. Yet the widespread use of magic among all classes in Greek society demonstrates that it was not compartmentalized and abandoned when people engaged in religious activities. The distinction between magical and religious actions is all about the way people view them. One is permissible, the other is not. The commonest type of magical spell is known as the defixio or binding spell, a spell by which the practitioner seeks to bind or incapacitate his enemy. Such spells were normally written on a metal tablet and buried in a secret place. They were employed for all manner of purposes: to bankrupt a business rival, to incapacitate a rival lover, blight someone's crops, cripple a rival athlete, or silence an orator in a crucial court case. The most famous orator of the ancient world, Demosthenes, is himself cursed on one surviving defixio. Other famous politicians were certainly not exempt. Other kinds of spells, curses, and imprecations have been found, like the defixiones, on tablets buried in out-of-the-way places. But they didn't have the binding part. They're not technically defixiones. However, they have a ton of other things in common with the binding spells. Some are just as negative in conception, but others were more concerned with justice, like punishing someone who broke the law. Here we find a very interesting distinction between religious and magical mindsets. We find imprecations against people who break laws, defile a sanctuary, commit perjury, or pollute a grave, all public offenses. The justice-related spells were actually pretty different than defixiones, however. People would carve them on gravestones or put them up in public squares so everyone could see them. It's like Shakespeare's "Cursed be he that moves my bones." They wanted everyone to know that the person deserved to be punished. In ancient Greece, magic was all about getting specific stuff done, achieving a very singular goal. This could be negative, like winning a court case, or positive, like making crops grow or keeping people safe. But even in big, public official rituals, people were focused on achieving these similar types of magical specific goals. It's pretty clear that almost all ancient Greek rituals had a magical or goal-oriented side to them, even if they don't always talk about it much in our sources. For example, a central component of the Eleusinian Mysteries was rain magic, was about making it rain. But that wasn't the only agricultural thing that they did there. Another obvious one is the Thesmophoria festival for Demeter, which was another huge religious event in ancient Greece. During this festival, the Greeks would throw a dead pig into a pit in the ground, dig it up later, chop it up, and then mix it with seeds they were going to plant. This process and the pig itself definitely represented fertility for the goddess Demeter, so this was basically a fertility ritual. Making the crops grow was a central goal of the festival, maybe even the most important one generally. But even though people know about this part of the festival, modern scholars and interpreters like us tend to focus more on how it gave women a chance to bond and support each other in an Athenian society where men pretty much ran everything. This is also a central component of the myth, definitely an important part of the festival, but focusing on it so much might tell us more about our own times and concerns than about what was really important back then. Another example is the Panathenaea, a festival honoring the goddess Athena on her midsummer's birthday. The event was probably the most important on the Athenian religious calendar and involved a grand parade through the city leading up to the Acropolis. During the festival, a huge number of oxen were sacrificed on the Acropolis, and a robe known as the peplos was presented to Athena's ancient statue in the Erechtheum, Athenopolis. Modern discussions of the event focus on the festival's social significance, emphasizing its role in uniting all classes and its position at the beginning of the civic year. While it undoubtedly served as a New Year's festival of renewal and reintegration on a macro scale, this does not exhaust its significance, and nor would we expect it to. For example, in mythology, the peplos is the aegis, Athena's impenetrable armor, earned in the battle against the giants. The aegis protected Athena, rendering her invulnerable. The ancient statue of Athena on the Acropolis was a talisman upon whose safety the city's security depended. The statue itself actually resembled the mythical Palladion of Troy, which was stolen in myth by Odysseus and Diomedes before the famous city could be taken by the Greeks. At an even deeper level, the goddess guarding the citadel, which was housed in the king's palace, is a figure rooted in Mycenaean religion. and this statue fundamentally represents the goddess Athena. So placing the peplos on this talisman was an act of simple magic at its core. As far as the garment itself, its fabric always depicted a single mythological theme, the battle of the giants and the gods. So basically, giving Athena a new dress was like buying an insurance policy for the city. Back in the 5th century BCE, this was like the purpose of the festival, the main event of the festival itself. You can imagine how scared everyone would be if something went wrong during the process of presenting the goddess with her peplos. Now, modern scholars have tended to downplay the importance of magic in ancient Greek religion for several reasons. One reason is the lingering influence of the Enlightenment and Christian notions of true religion, which tend to view magic as superstition. Another reason is the methodological bias of structuralism and semiotics, and this tends to overemphasize the sociological aspect of ritual at the expense of the goal-oriented aspect, which has such a connection to magic. A famous example is Jane Harrison and the Cambridge School, which had a very specific idea about myths and rituals. They thought myth was like the script of the ritual, explaining what was going on. For example, in the Thesmophoria, when the ancient Greeks buried a pig underground, there actually was a myth that a swineherd got swallowed up in a hole when Hades kidnapped his bride, Persephone. The idea was that myths were like that, explaining why certain rituals existed. And the Cambridge School believed that most rituals actually started out as magical acts, especially those related to fertility. The problem of magic and religion also influenced the work of James Frazer. Now, anthropology was all about figuring out where social customs came from and how they developed over time. So it made sense for Frazer to see magic as an early, primitive version of religion. He thought that religion evolved into something more advanced, where people focused on being good and worshiping the gods out of respect, not because they were trying to control them. Frazer's ideas were influenced by Christian beliefs about what true religion should be about, and also concepts from the Enlightenment. Frazer's views on magic and religion have long since been seen as too simplistic, and not much later, actually, the views of the Cambridge School also on myth and ritual were also seen to be a bit too simplistic. A huge amount of Greek mythology actually has no attested connection with any ritual at all, and all of the myths that we know do connect to certain rituals often have more complex relationships than the ritualists seem to understand or suggest. To take a single example, one of the most successful structuralist analysis in Greek myth, that of the Prometheus myth, demonstrates that while the strictly ideological part is pretty straightforward, there's a structure underneath the myth. For example, during a sacrifice, Prometheus wrapped the bones in fat because he wanted the meat, and so do we. The kind of story that the source for Prometheus, Hesiod, created to account for this central rite of Greek religion is actually much more significant than the structuralist underpinnings. So even if the solutions proposed by Frazer and the others weren't valid, the problems they pointed out still definitely exist. And there's actually still a lot of impressive data on magical practices and mindsets that need to be explained, and hopefully will be in the future. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. We're going to leave it here for right now. Look out actually for part 2 of this series, where we look at the relationship of ancient Greek religion and magic to science and a scientific worldview. Alright guys.